There's a moment intelligent people eventually experience, a moment that changes the way they see everyone around them. At first, it feels subtle, a strange tension in conversations, a shift in people's behavior, an invisible distance you cannot fully explain. You begin noticing that the more aware you become, the more uncomfortable people seem around you. Not openly. Most of them will still smile, still laugh, still speak to you politely. But underneath it, you can feel something else. Resistance. Because intelligence has a disturbing effect on human beings. It quietly exposes things people spend their entire lives trying to hide. Insecurity, pretension, false confidence, emotional weakness. And the terrifying part is, most people will never consciously admit this. Carl Jung understood something deeply unsettling about human nature. People do not only fear darkness, they fear anyone capable of revealing it. That is why intelligent people are often misunderstood, excluded, or secretly disliked, even when they have done absolutely nothing wrong. Because awareness changes the social dynamic. The moment you stop blindly following the emotional patterns of the crowd, you unintentionally become a threat to people still trapped inside them. And if you have spent your life feeling emotionally disconnected from others, if people randomly become defensive around you, if shallow conversations exhaust you, if you constantly feel like you are observing human behavior instead of participating in it, there may be a reason for that. Not everyone fears intelligence because it is superior. Most people fear it because it forces them to confront themselves. And once you understand the psychological mechanism behind this, you will never see social behavior the same way again. Most intelligent people spend years believing the problem is social anxiety. They assume they are simply too quiet, too introverted, too distant. But eventually, they begin noticing a pattern that feels impossible to ignore. The tension only appears when they stop pretending, when they stop laughing at things they do not find funny, when they stop performing excitement to make other people comfortable, when they stop shrinking their awareness to fit the emotional atmosphere of the room. That is when people begin reacting differently, not always aggressively. Sometimes the reaction is almost invisible, a subtle coldness, a strange defensiveness, forced humor, passive hostility hidden beneath politeness. And if you are highly observant, you feel it immediately, because intelligent people often notice emotional shifts long before anyone says a word. Carl Jung believed that human beings spend enormous amounts of energy constructing what he called the persona, the social mask, the carefully designed identity people present to the world in order to gain approval, avoid rejection, and survive socially. Most conversations are not authentic exchanges between two conscious individuals. They are performances, tiny negotiations for status, validation, acceptance, and control. That is why so many social interactions feel emotionally exhausting to highly aware people. Because they are not only hearing words, they are detecting the hidden motivations beneath them. They notice when confidence is fake, when kindness is strategic, when someone is speaking only to protect their image, when a person changes personalities depending on who enters the room. And once you begin seeing these patterns, normal conversation becomes difficult to tolerate. You start feeling disconnected in environments where everyone else appears perfectly comfortable. Not because you believe you are superior, but because pretending becomes psychologically painful. Most people are unconsciously addicted to approval. They constantly monitor how they are perceived, how they sound, how they appear, whether they are accepted by the group. And because of this, many people develop personalities designed entirely around social survival. But awareness disrupts the performance. The moment someone enters the room who sees beyond appearances, people feel exposed, even if nothing is said. This is why intelligent individuals often experience subtle social resistance throughout their lives. Their presence alone unconsciously pressures others to confront the gap between who they truly are and who they pretend to be. And most people will do almost anything to avoid facing that gap, including rejecting the person who quietly reveals it. That is why highly aware individuals often leave social situations feeling strangely drained, not because they dislike people, but because they are constantly surrounded by emotional theater disguised as connection. And after enough experiences like this, silence begins to feel safer than performance. To understand why intelligent people are often quietly rejected by society, you first have to understand one of Carl Jung's most disturbing ideas: the shadow. Jung believed that every human being carries a hidden psychological self buried beneath their conscious personality. A part of themselves they refuse to fully acknowledge, not because it does not exist, but because facing it would threaten the image they have created about who they believe they are. This hidden side contains everything people suppress in order to remain socially accepted: their insecurity, their jealousy, their selfishness, their fear, their weakness, their hidden resentment toward others. And most people spend their entire lives avoiding this part of themselves, because confronting the shadow is painful. It destroys comforting illusions. It forces a person to realize they are not as honest, confident, kind, or self-aware as they pretend to be. So instead of confronting these uncomfortable truths internally, the human mind does something fascinating. It projects them outward. Projection was one of Jung's most important psychological discoveries. When people cannot tolerate something within themselves, they unconsciously attack it in others. The arrogant person constantly accuses others of ego. The dishonest person becomes obsessed with accusing people of manipulation. The insecure person secretly resents confidence, and the emotionally unconscious person often feels deeply threatened by awareness. This is where intelligent people unknowingly become dangerous, not because they attack people, but because their presence quietly exposes what others try to avoid within themselves. Awareness functions like a mirror, and mirrors become terrifying when someone has spent their entire life hiding from their own reflection. This is why intelligent individuals often confuse people's reactions. They think, "I was respectful. I stayed quiet. I did nothing wrong." And yet, people still become defensive around them, still compete with them, still subtly exclude them, still react with hidden hostility they cannot fully explain. Because on a psychological level, high awareness creates emotional pressure. The intelligent person often notices contradictions other people desperately hope remain invisible. They notice fake confidence, performative kindness, manipulation hidden beneath politeness, false certainty disguised as intelligence. And even when they never mention it, people feel seen. That feeling alone can trigger deep psychological discomfort. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But most people do not want understanding. They want comfort. They want protection from self-awareness, which is why society often rewards those who maintain illusions, while quietly resisting those who expose them. The highly intelligent person unintentionally disrupts emotional comfort zones simply by existing authentically. And the more conscious someone becomes, the more isolated they often feel, because they slowly realize something deeply unsettling about human behavior. Most people do not seek truth. They seek psychological safety, even if it requires living inside illusion. And once you truly understand this, human behavior begins to make disturbing sense. One of the hardest truths intelligent people eventually discover is that most human beings do not actually want truth. They want emotional comfort, And the moment intelligence threatens that comfort, people begin reacting emotionally instead of rationally. Carl Jung understood that the human ego is incredibly fragile, far more fragile than most people realize. The ego is not simply confidence. It is the psychological identity a person builds in order to feel valuable, secure, and important in the world. And the problem is, high intelligence unintentionally threatens that identity, especially when someone has secretly built their self-worth on feeling superior, knowledgeable, respected, or socially dominant, because intelligence changes the hierarchy of a room without saying a single word. You can see this dynamic everywhere once you become aware of it. In workplaces, the most intelligent employee is not always the most liked. In fact, highly capable people are often subtly isolated, not because they are incompetent, but because their competence creates insecurity in others. A highly aware person asks deeper questions, notices flaws others ignore, detects manipulation, sees inefficiency, recognizes dishonesty. And even when they remain completely respectful, their awareness quietly destabilizes the emotional comfort of less secure individuals, especially authority figures, because nothing terrifies an insecure person more than someone they cannot psychologically control. This is why intelligent individuals often experience strange workplace tension. A manager becomes cold toward them for no clear reason. Coworkers become competitive instead of collaborative. Ideas get dismissed at first, then later repeated by someone else and suddenly praised. The intelligent person leaves confused. They think the environment values competence, but many social systems value emotional hierarchy far more than truth. And this dynamic becomes even more painful in friendships. At first, people admire intelligence from a distance, but over time, awareness becomes exhausting for those committed to illusion. Because highly intelligent people often stop participating in superficial emotional games. They stop pretending to be impressed. They stop blindly agreeing with the group. They stop performing personalities for approval. And eventually, their authenticity begins making others uncomfortable. Friends who once felt close suddenly become defensive. Conversations feel strangely forced. Jealousy appears where support once existed, not always openly. Sometimes it appears as sarcasm, dismissive jokes, passive hostility disguised as humor. Because insecurity rarely announces itself honestly, it hides behind subtle emotional behavior. And nowhere is this tension more emotionally complicated than inside families. Families unconsciously assign psychological roles to each person: the responsible one, the successful one, the emotional one, the quiet one, the intelligent one. And the moment someone begins evolving beyond the role they were assigned, resistance appears. Especially when awareness exposes unhealthy family dynamics people have normalized for years. The intelligent person starts noticing manipulation, emotional immaturity, control disguised as love, approval used as emotional currency. And suddenly, simply becoming self-aware feels like betrayal to the people around them, because awareness disrupts unconscious systems. This is why intelligent individuals often feel emotionally exhausted around people who claim to care about them. They are not exhausted by conversation itself. They are exhausted by constantly navigating fragile egos. Carl Jung believed that most people will protect their psychological comfort at all costs, even if it means rejecting truth itself. Because truth requires transformation, and transformation threatens identity. That is why people often reject intelligent individuals before they ever truly understand them. Not because intelligence is cruel, but because intelligence forces awareness. And awareness is painful for anyone still emotionally dependent on illusion. People say they want honesty, but what most people truly want is reassurance. They want to feel correct, safe, validated, superior. And the moment truth threatens those emotional needs, the mind instinctively defends itself, even against reality itself, which is why intelligent people eventually realize something deeply lonely about human nature. Many people would rather protect a comfortable illusion than confront an uncomfortable truth. The modern world has created a strange illusion. It constantly claims to value intelligence, while quietly rewarding performance instead. And once you begin noticing this, modern society starts feeling deeply artificial. Carl Jung warned that human beings have an incredible ability to lose themselves inside collective behavior, to abandon individuality in exchange for acceptance. And nowhere is this more visible today than in the digital age. Look carefully at modern culture. Most people are no longer building identities. They are constructing brands, carefully edited personalities designed to appear successful, attractive, confident, intelligent, spiritually evolved, emotionally unbothered. Everything becomes performance. Conversations become performance. Opinions become performance. Morality becomes performance. Even authenticity becomes performance. Social media accelerated this psychological transformation to an extreme level. People no longer ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "How will this make me appear?" And because of this, modern society rewards visibility more than depth, confidence more than wisdom, speed more than reflection, entertainment more than understanding. The loudest voice in the room is often treated as the smartest, even when it lacks substance entirely, because most people do not evaluate intelligence deeply enough to recognize it. They evaluate certainty. This is why shallow confidence often dominates social environments. A person who speaks aggressively with certainty will usually gain more social approval than someone speaking carefully with nuance. The deep thinker pauses, questions, reflects, considers complexity, but modern culture interprets hesitation as weakness and certainty as power, even when that certainty is completely false. This creates an incredibly isolating experience for intelligent individuals, because highly aware people often see complexity where others see simplicity. They recognize that reality is layered, contradictory, psychologically messy, which means they naturally speak with more caution and depth. But herd mentality punishes depth. The group prefers emotional simplicity, clear enemies, simple answers, immediate validation. And anyone who disrupts that emotional rhythm risks social rejection. Carl Jung believed that the collective mind fears individuality because individuality threatens unconscious control. A truly self-aware person becomes difficult to manipulate. They stop blindly following trends, stop chasing validation, stop outsourcing their thinking to the crowd. And the moment someone psychologically separates from the herd notices, not consciously, but emotionally, because groups survive through conformity. This is why modern society often treats deep thinkers strangely. People may admire them privately, while excluding them socially. Because depth forces reflection, and reflection is uncomfortable in a world addicted to distraction. The modern world does not reward depth. It rewards performance. It rewards people who can confidently display certainty, even when they possess very little understanding beneath it. And this creates one of the loneliest experiences an intelligent person can feel. Watching a world obsessed with appearances, while quietly craving something real, something honest, something psychologically genuine. But the deeper your awareness becomes, the harder it becomes to find. Eventually, something begins changing inside highly intelligent people. Not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, conversation by conversation, disappointment by disappointment, mask after mask. They begin emotionally withdrawing from the world around them. At first, they try to fight it. They force themselves to socialize more, to relate more, to participate more. But deep down, something no longer feels genuine. Carl Jung believed that awareness creates separation, because the more conscious a person becomes, the harder it becomes to comfortably participate in unconscious environments. And modern society is filled with unconscious environments. Most interactions revolve around performance instead of connection, validation instead of honesty, entertainment instead of meaning, which is why many intelligent individuals begin experiencing a strange form of loneliness that is difficult to explain to other people. They are surrounded by others, yet still feel psychologically alone. Not because they hate humanity, but because shallow interaction slowly becomes exhausting. You start noticing how rarely people truly listen, how most conversations are simply opportunities for people to talk about themselves, how emotional reactions overpower logic, how honesty disappears the moment social approval is threatened. And after enough experiences like this, you stop expecting depth from people, not out of arrogance, out of exhaustion. This is the stage where many highly aware individuals begin isolating themselves emotionally. They spend more time alone, more time thinking, observing, analyzing human behavior from a distance. And strangely, solitude begins feeling safer than connection, because solitude does not demand performance. You no longer have to shrink your thoughts to protect fragile egos. You no longer have to pretend superficial conversations are meaningful. You no longer have to perform emotional roles simply to maintain acceptance. Silence becomes peaceful, not because loneliness feels good, but because false connection feels worse. This is one of the most misunderstood experiences intelligent people face. Others often interpret their withdrawal as coldness, arrogance, or emotional detachment. But in reality, many intelligent individuals are emotionally overwhelmed, not emotionally empty. They feel too much. They notice too much. They think too deeply about things most people quickly ignore. And because of this, their nervous system becomes exhausted by environments filled with noise, superficiality, and emotional performance. Carl Jung warned that modern individuals are dangerously disconnected from their inner world. People distract themselves constantly to avoid confronting their own thoughts. But highly intelligent people often cannot escape their inner world so easily. Their minds continuously search for meaning, patterns, truth, contradictions. And eventually this creates psychological distance between them and the people around them. Because once someone begins seeking truth deeply, ordinary interaction starts feeling strangely artificial. You begin craving conversations that almost never happen. Conversations about fear, meaning, mortality, consciousness, human nature, purpose. But instead, most social environments remain trapped at the surface, and this creates a painful realization. The more aware you become, the fewer people you truly relate to. Not because you believe you are better than others, but because your mind no longer finds comfort in pretending. This is why many intelligent individuals secretly feel like observers inside society, rather than participants within it. They walk through crowded rooms feeling invisible, emotionally disconnected even while smiling, listening to conversations while internally feeling miles away from them. And perhaps the most painful part is this: they often cannot fully explain their loneliness to anyone else, because the loneliness they experience is not physical, it is psychological. It is the loneliness of feeling mentally awake in environments that reward unconsciousness. And over time, that awareness changes a person forever. Carl Jung believed that every human being faces a choice at some point in life: remain psychologically asleep or become conscious enough to see reality clearly. But what most people never realize is that awareness comes with a price, because the moment you begin seeing through illusion, you can never fully return to unconscious living again. This is the stage Jung called individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, not socially accepted, not emotionally comfortable, whole. And individuation is deeply lonely because it forces a person to separate from collective thinking, to stop blindly adopting beliefs simply because they are popular, to stop performing identities designed for approval, to stop living according to expectations that were never truly theirs. Most people avoid this process completely, not because they are weak, but because confronting yourself honestly is terrifying. It requires destroying illusions you once depended on emotionally. Illusions about society, about relationships, about success, about identity, about yourself. And this is why highly intelligent individuals often feel internally divided from the world around them. Part of them still desires connection, but another part can no longer ignore what it sees. The manipulation hidden beneath politeness, the insecurity hidden beneath arrogance, the emotional emptiness hidden beneath social performance. Once awareness reaches a certain level, you stop reacting to appearances the way most people do. You begin paying attention to energy instead of words, motives instead of image, patterns instead of promises. And this changes your relationship with society completely, because modern culture survives through distraction, constant stimulation, constant entertainment, constant noise. People are encouraged to stay busy enough to never confront themselves deeply, but awareness interrupts distraction. It forces reflection, and reflection is dangerous in a society built on emotional escape. Carl Jung warned that unconscious people do not like conscious individuals. Not because conscious people are cruel, but because they quietly remind others of what they are avoiding within themselves. This is why self-aware individuals often trigger emotional reactions without understanding why. Their authenticity exposes artificiality. Their calmness exposes insecurity. Their depth exposes superficiality. And people rarely enjoy being confronted with those realizations, especially when it happens unconsciously. That is why many intelligent individuals eventually stop trying so hard to be understood. They realize most people are not listening to understand. They are listening to protect their existing worldview. And the moment truth threatens identity, the mind defends itself automatically, even against reality itself. This is why Jung believed psychological awakening is not a pleasant experience. It is disruptive, painful, transformative. It separates you from comforting illusions before it reconnects you to something more authentic. And perhaps this explains why so many intelligent people secretly feel exhausted by modern life. They are trying to exist consciously inside systems designed to reward unconscious behavior, trying to find depth in environments addicted to surface-level performance, trying to preserve authenticity in a culture built on image. And over time, this creates a feeling that is difficult to describe unless you have experienced it yourself. The feeling that you no longer fully belong to the world around you. But maybe that feeling is not a flaw. Maybe it is evidence that your mind has started waking up. Maybe the reason you have always felt different is because you were never meant to fully belong to a world built on performance. Maybe your exhaustion was never weakness. Maybe it was the psychological cost of constantly existing in environments that demanded masks instead of honesty. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, But becoming who you truly are is not easy, because the moment you stop living unconsciously, you begin losing attachment to things that once felt normal. You stop craving shallow approval. You stop forcing meaningless connections. You stop pretending to admire people simply because society tells you to. And yes, that process can feel incredibly lonely. But loneliness is sometimes the space where awareness is born. The world teaches people to fear solitude, to constantly distract themselves from silence. But silence is often where intelligent people finally begin hearing themselves clearly. Away from noise, away from performance, away from social pressure. That is where clarity begins. And perhaps the truth is this: you were never emotionally disconnected because you were broken. You became disconnected because your mind could no longer comfortably participate in illusion. Because once awareness expands, pretending becomes painful. And maybe that feeling you have carried for years, the feeling of observing people instead of fully relating to them, was never a curse. Maybe it was the beginning of consciousness itself. Carl Jung believed that psychological awakening often begins with alienation. A person starts realizing they no longer fit comfortably into collective thinking. And for a while, that realization feels terrifying. But eventually, something changes. You stop seeing your awareness as isolation and start seeing it as freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from unconscious behavior, freedom from the exhausting need to perform for acceptance. Because the people who spend their entire lives desperately trying to fit into society often never discover who they truly are beneath it. But those willing to walk through loneliness consciously sometimes discover something far more valuable than approval: themselves. So if you have spent years feeling emotionally out of place in this world, perhaps your mind has been trying to tell you something important. Not everyone who feels alone is lost. Some people are simply becoming aware. And once that process begins, there is no returning to sleep again.